Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the annual FEL Priestley Memorial Lectures. My name is Emily Gilbert. I'm the Vice Principal of University College and a Professor of Canadian Studies and Geography and Planning. To begin, I would like to acknowledge this land on which the University of Toronto operates. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Huron-Wendat, the Seneca, and the Mississaugas of the Credit. Today, this meeting place is still home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to work on this land. We take it as our responsibility at University College to not just read out these words of acknowledgement, but to give space to and amplify Indigenous voices and perspectives whenever we can. In this vein, we are delighted to welcome Jordan Abel to give the three-part Priestley Lectures this year. Yesterday, in the first lecture, Jordan gave several powerful readings from his work and underlined the importance of read research creation. By this, he means the imperative to make space for Indigenous scholars, writers, and concepts that don't fit easily into normative categories. And today, on day 2, we have something special planned, a conversation between Jordan and David Chariandy. And before I get into this and let you know how we'll proceed, I'll quickly introduce both of them, with apologies in advance for my brevity because I think we want to get to the main event. I can't do due justice to all of their extraordinary successes, but I'll just present some of the highlights. So Jordan Abel is a queer NISHGA writer, poet, and academic. He holds a PhD in English from Simon Fraser University and is an associate professor in the Department of English and Film Studies at the University of Alberta. His innovative writing explores themes of Indigenous identity, settler colonialism, and intergenerational trauma. He has published 3 books of poetry, The Place of Scraps in 2013, Uninhabited in 2015, and Injun in 2016, the last of which received the prestigious Griffin Poetry Prize. These books provide incisive critiques of settler colonialism and foreground relationships to place, especially in light of the dispossession of Indigenous peoples from their land. In 2023, Jordan published his debut novel, Empty Spaces, which won one of Canada's top prizes for fiction, the Governor-General's Award. As we heard yesterday, the hypnotic language of this novel interrogates and remixes the colonial archive in a form of literary resistance. Jordan has also published a memoir, NISHGA, which is the jumping off point for this afternoon. NISHGA blends personal narrative, archival material, and visual elements and is being celebrated for its deeply personal examination of Indigenous dispossession and the legacy of residential schools. Originally published in 2000, NISHGA was reissued this year in 2025 as part of the new Canada Classic series with McClellan Stewart, part of Penguin Random House. And it's this new 2025 edition, which includes an introduction by Professor David Chariandy, who we are also delighted to welcome today to be in conversation with Jordan. So David Chariandy is also a celebrated Canadian novelist, essayist, and academic. His work explores themes of identity, race, memory, and belonging. His scholarship in fiction contributes significantly to the fields of Black Canadian literature, Caribbean diasporic studies, and contemporary Canadian writing. David is the Avie Bennett Chair in Canadian Literature and a professor of English here at U of T. He's also a fellow of the Royal Society of Canada. He has published 2 novels, Sukuyan and Brother, both set in Scarborough, both of which have been praised for their lyrical prose. Weaving past and present, Sukuyan tells the story of a young man who returns to his childhood home and confronts the trauma of his mother's past, from her childhood in Trinidad to her immigration to Canada and the racism that she faced. The novel won the Forward Magazine Book of the Year Award, the Gold Prize for Literary Fiction. The next novel, Brother, is a powerful personal and political novel. As a tragic event unfolds, the complexities of brotherhood and family are revealed, and we come to understand the impact of loss, grief, race, racism, and resilience in a Trinidadian Canadian family, with impacts that reverberate beyond into the wider community. Brother also won multiple awards, including the Rogers Writers Trust Fiction Prize, which is one of Canada's top fiction awards, as well as the Toronto Book Award. And then the novel was adapted into a feature film directed by Clement Virgo in 2022. David has also written a nonfiction book, I've been meaning to tell you, A Letter to My Daughter, which came out in 2018, which offers a powerful mediation on race, history, and fatherhood, but also of hope and possibility. So we're delighted to have these two amazing writers and thinkers with us today. They're going to have a planned, unplanned conversation about writing and other things. We'll then have time for questions from the audience. We will have a roaming mic so that people at the front can hear your questions. We're also recording this event, which we will post online in a few days. So we ask for you to wait for the microphone to arrive so that everyone can hear your questions. And last point, following this Q&A, we will have a reception that will be at the back of the room. For those of you who were here yesterday, you have heard me announce that we would have books for sale. Unfortunately, they are stuck in a UPS held somewhere in Toronto's traffic, and they have not been able to arrive. So we are sorry to say that we do not have books available for signing today, but we encourage you to purchase them, preferably at an independent bookstore near you. So without further ado, please, David, Jordan, come up to the stage.
Which one do you consider? Oh, okay. So.
Yeah, I'll give you, yes. Of course.
Hey, thank you for that. For that lovely introduction, Emily.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much, Emily.
You're right away, so really well.
Thank you everyone for being here on this afternoon. Indeed, good afternoon. I have to begin by thanking University College, thanking Professor Gilbert, Professor Stock, all others involved in this lecture series, those who are attending to this room. Thank you. I guess I want to offer special thanks to Jordan. Jordan, this is a deep honor to be in conversation with you. I always learn so much. I am always inspired walking away from a conversation with you. And so thank you for, if you chose me, I'm not sure, but if you did.
I feel like I did choose you.
Okay.
Because you're amazing and brilliant. And thank you for agreeing to be part of this thing.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, and it's great to just to see you in the city. We were in the same city for a little while, and I've missed that, and it's nice to see you here. So maybe I'll give a little bit of a recap, or just suggest how this dialogue as a lecture fits into the three lectures that. That you're giving. Yesterday, you indeed, as Emily mentioned, and thank you, Emily, for a kind of over and beyond bio that most people don't actually put together a bio, an original bio of what we work on. So thank you for that. That's really quite an honor. You gave a lecture entitled Red Research Creation and the Textual Contours of Land. As Emily mentioned, one of the things that was centered, that developed out of that lecture was the concept of red research creation. You also focused on your books, Empty Spaces and Uninhabited, two extraordinary texts. I love all of your texts, but for different reasons.
Sure.
I love all of your texts. My understanding is that the third lecture, the lecture tomorrow, is entitled Indigenous Knowledge Transmission Through Concrete Poetry. And you'll give us a glimpse, a really precious glimpse of your forthcoming book, Dad Era.
Yes. I will be doing that. I'm really excited to share that. I think it's, I have a lot to say about it, but I'm looking forward to sharing that work with all of you.
Yeah, well, I am so looking forward to that, not only because it's a book by you, but the subject matter, or maybe the generational address or the understanding of what it is to be a father or a dad.
Yeah.
Is also of interest to me. We under complicated circumstances, what it is to be a father. Today, I think we've agreed to have a discussion about some of the more linguistic aspects of your book, NISHGA.
Sure.
And I wonder if you'd be comfortable opening with a short reading from the book, just to give us some of the music of that text.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm more than happy to do that. So NISHGA is, it's a work that's about intergenerational trauma and the afterlives of residential schools, and it's also a book that's about me and my mom and my dad and my grandparents. And I think it's a really heavy, difficult work. So the only way that I've ever been able to start reading from this book is actually to read from the open letter that begins the book. So I can read from that, and then I can read from some other sections and areas. But I'll start at the beginning. So this is such a wide book. It's difficult to hold. The the Canada Classics edition is the width is less extreme. And it's a beautiful edition. Okay. An open letter to all my relations. It's taken me a long while to gather up the courage to share this work with you. This book has been difficult for me to write and for me to return to. This is a book with painful subject matter. This is a book about intergenerational trauma, Indigenous dispossession, and the afterlife of residential schools. It is also a book that is about sexual and physical violence, lateral violence, depression, suicide, and self-harm. While I ultimately hope that this will be a book that helps people, I also want you to take care of yourself first. If now is not the time, there will be another time. And I think this is the only page that I can start with, maybe for obvious reasons. But so when I was writing the first draft of this book, it was in the context of a PhD dissertation, of which several of my supervisory committee members are here, including Sophie and David, and the other members were Deanna Ryder and Steve Collis. And I remember when I shared this first draft, this first substantive draft of this work, all four of you got back to me and told me in different ways that this was a really difficult book to encounter as people who loved me and cared for me and wanted the best for me, and that several of you asked for something that was akin to a content warning or a trigger warning, and I thought really deeply about that, and I think that was a very important question to ask myself about how one might encounter this work and who might encounter it and the circumstances in which others might encounter it, and so I spent some time reflecting on that request, and it felt really important to me to write something that would enact some care for the reader, for the people that might encounter this book, and to yeah, just create a moment of conversation and dialogue, and create a moment where one was invited to put the book down, and maybe not ever pick it up again, if they needed to. And certainly, I want people to take that part of it seriously. So yeah, so that's the open letter. I can say more. I can read other parts of it.
Could I ask? Hello. Could I ask a question about?
Yeah. Oh.
You've so there we go. It's okay. You've so brilliantly anticipated a question that I wanted to ask you.
Yeah.
In that the question would be, given that this specific language, I think is really important. You just mentioned this. You say that NISHGA is about intergenerational trauma, Indigenous dispossession, and the afterlives of residential schools. I guess I did want to ask you a question about a twofold question. Not only how to take care of yourself when writing about these extraordinarily difficult, potentially re-traumatizing things. Yeah. But given this present context, how do you continue presenting on these materials? Yeah. And likewise, take care of yourself. I remember that NISHGA was launched in Vancouver the day after news broke nationwide of the 215 unmarked graves in the Kamloops, former Kamloops residential school. And I remember a few days after that, and I hope I'm not betraying confidence, but it is, I mentioned this publicly in writing once as a way of a futile effort to perhaps offer a bit of warning to people, and but that you presented NISHGA a few days after that to a deeply appreciative audience, as I'm sure this is. But then you whispered under your breath to me as we were walking away, I'm not sure how many more times I can do this. Yeah. And I think of that every time I hear of you presenting on this book. Sure. So maybe those two questions, how do you take care of yourself, and how do you continue to take care of yourself in representing as we are called upon to do? Well, I mean, to answer the second part first, I can say that it is. I kind of have a strategy, so to speak, which is that, there's only certain parts of this book that I'm ever able to speak out loud, and there's really only three parts, and one of them I read to you, and there's so much in this book that I feel like I can't engage with again at the level of presentation and performance. Like I'm really grateful that the book continues to circulate, and I'm really happy to answer questions about some of these ideas, and also it's very difficult to re-encounter some of this text. So part of a self-defense mechanism maybe is just to just to focus on the couple of parts, of this book that I can speak out loud, and to answer the and also there are so when they asked me, so NISHGA was very recently turned into an audiobook. On the occasion of this Kannada release, and they asked me, as they do, to
be one of the voices and to record these lines. And I thought about that, and I did not do that. Just because it just felt so difficult to re-encounter some of these pages and to voice them. And then it, would, I'm sure, probably feel like doubly or triply difficult to do so in the space of the recording booth. So the first part of your question, though, about how one takes care of themselves when they're doing this kind of work, is that when I was writing this book, I felt like it was a really deeply necessary story to write, and it felt very important to talk about urban Indigenous identity and the afterlife of residential schools, and also how residential schools continue to linger, several generations, after, in an embodied way within us. I don't know if I took the proper care for myself in that space of writing this book. And the advice that I give to students, is to take that time and, to give yourself the time and the space to do this kind of work and to be able to step away from it. And when I was in it, it felt like, part of the sacrifice I was making, was to not take that time for myself, for, many reasons. And I'm not sure that was the right choice. But that is the choice that I made, to do the work, felt very difficult. And that I kind of felt like, if I just, if it's just a sprint, if I just like run through it, as quickly as possible, then maybe, there'll be another side to it, at the other end. And I think that that's partially been true, but also, writing this work really took a lot out of me. Like I feel like I would have much rather written about anything else. And, and that's, it's a difficult realization to come to. Yeah.
I am conscious that I interrupted you. You were maybe about to read another passage, but I do have a question that could flow from what you just what you've just said.
Let's do the question.
Okay. Well, maybe obviously the materials you're addressing in NISHGA are difficult, extremely difficult.
Yeah.
Deeply difficult because they are so personal and so complexly implicating and implicated, I guess is a word.
Sure.
What, in contrast, I would say, the stakes of the work is so clear, the personal and cultural, political stakes of the writing that you do. But what I'm so struck in your body of work is both in your method and then the works themselves that are produced is what I would call, a kind of like an implicit critique of conventional notions of creativity and creative writing. This notion that the author, possessed as we are with creative genius, create original works birthed from our imagination. Perhaps these are notions that are, who knows, the genealogy, perhaps romantic in origin. Layered on top of that, we could say that the memoir is a genre that in which obviously personal expression the notion that you express yourselves, is just at the heart of an ordinary understanding of the
Sure.
memoir.
Yeah.
What's so interesting is that your work in general seems to involve finding materials out there in the world
Yeah.
and operating upon them through technological interventions, through different types of mediations of your own invention. I'm just so curious that what I see is, I guess I'm trying to formulate this question, the tension between what we would expect in a memoir, what we would expect of a creative writer, and how you have organized NISHGA and all your materials, but NISHGA as well, which is a manipulation of existing documents. More than anything else. It is about those documents. It's not about a force that emanates from here and that you express and that is original. Do you see what I'm trying to suggest?
Yes.
And I guess I'm getting at, So I guess the question then is, did that help you finish NISHGA? Did that make NISHGA even possible?
Yeah.
In a sense,
I think so. I'm all of my, as you say, like all of my work, deals with found documents and text, and with NISHGA, I think a big part of the process for me in attempting to understand my place in the world, just from like a research perspective, was just sifting through these old documents that I had access to. Like my mom gave me this several giant boxes that were they were full of all kinds of things, including scraps of paper and photographs and notes and all of this stuff. And so part of my feeling, when I was going through those documents and trying to like piece together all of these, stories that, included me in some way, included my mom and my dad and my family, like that process felt really important, and it felt true to stay true to that process as I went about writing the book. So the document came by, or like it felt like it came very naturally, that my role as a writer was less a generative one and more a curatorial one. That that part of what I was doing is just arranging these pieces, for my own benefit in some ways. And I say this in the book, but I think the phrase I use is to hold up all the pieces, so that I can see how they connect together. And that was, that's kind of, what gave this work its shape. But also, within the writing process for this book, in trying to address the complexities of Indigenous identity and also just like my story, I felt like, I would put forward a document like the NISGA eligibility criteria. And then I would put forward another document that was like this legal affidavit between my mom and my dad. And then I would put forward, this other document that was, like a note that I had taken, or like this kind of like more of a memoir. And I kept having this feeling that, I was attempting to address these questions that were really kind of slippery and complicated, and that the things that I was putting forward, didn't fully address the questions that I wanted to address, and that it was necessary. It felt necessary to, step to the side and use another approach, and that was, I think those layers of documents and all the different kinds of genres that are within NISHGA, I think they're there because in a problem-based way, they are required to, try to, address the problem from another angle. And maybe the biggest area where that's visible, or, the area that I see that being the most visible maybe, is through the use of my dad's artwork and my engagements with my dad's art, as I felt like there was, and those engagements I think are one of my favorite parts of this book, and I really felt like they added something that I wasn't able to articulate with words, which is that my dad, as a traditional Nisga'a artist, was doing these things, and in another world, in a parallel dimension, like maybe I would have learned that stuff from him, and I would have learned along like those shapes, and the contours of his work would be within me in some way, but that I had to engage them, in the limited kind of capacities that I have, as also I guess a visual artist, to just try to learn from the contours and shapes of his work, so that this is a very long way to answer this question, but I think that like those engagements, which are also kinds of documents that I pull from and intervene into, I guess, or maybe even just am in dialogue with, that became a really meaningful way to answer this slippery question about Indigenous knowledge transmission, and what it means to be Nisga'a, what it means to be dispossessed from that community and also dispossessed from that knowledge, and really having like no choice but to engage with the shapes of my dad's art, because that that teaching wasn't something that that wasn't a moment that we had.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They remain, for me, truly the most moving, the most thought-provoking parts of an extraordinary book. I think you've named your name.
Thanks.
Yeah.
To give you a bit of a preview,
Yeah.
that work continues in my next book, which is a book called Dad Era. That work continues, the work with my of engaging in my dad's artwork, and I feel I'll talk more about this tomorrow probably, but I really felt like the work that I'd done in NISHGA, particularly with engaging my dad's art, just wasn't finished yet. It hadn't reached a point of conclusion. Like the book was over, and it's doing its thing, but also I wanted to continue to engage, wanted to continue working with his work, and so that's a process that I've continued forward, and in yet another medium, Dad Era is being published as a work of poetry, but of course NISHGA contains poetry within it as well as other things.
Of course.
Yeah.
NISHGA being this profound dialogue between son and father. NISHGA, as you said before that, being a curatorial
Sure.
project, and I love
Yeah.
that it's always the case. I speak with you and you find the right word. That's a curating of these available documents,
Yeah.
and everything's a document, even your own reflections then become presented as documents in the book. They too are documents.
Yes. Yeah.
NISHGA answering the question, again, what you've just said, what it means to be Nisga'a. But the title of your book is not Nisga'a, it's NISHGA.
That's right.
I wonder if you could, for those maybe not quite familiar with the book, suggest what's at stake in that title, and also perhaps when that title came to you.
Yeah. So for those of you who haven't encountered it yet, there's several moments where the word NISHGA comes up, and one of those moments is in my dad's business cards. So he uses that, I assume, pronunciation, and also uses it with that spelling, and it's I guess the way I would describe it is that I mean. So the correct way to say the name of my nation, the nation of my grandparents, is Nisga'a with a K sound, and all of my life, all of my life, I think until that moment that I write about with Chief Robert Joseph, like I'd been pronouncing it that way because that's what my mom told me. That's what I heard others say. That's what was on the materials that I had access to. And a bunch of the book is about, what it means to grow up outside of my community and without other Nisga'a people. And so I had this, really bizarre encounter with Chief Robert Joseph that I write about, where we had dinner together on Water Street in Vancouver, and had this moment where I'd mispronounced. I told him I was NISHGA, and there's this whole section of the book that is kind of about that exchange. But I feel like that title gestures towards this other way of being, this other kind of place of urban indigeneity and also dispossession, one in which other Indigenous peoples sometimes don't understand, and other non-Indigenous peoples also don't understand. So I feel like that title was so important to me, and I think it did come fairly early on, because I knew that after I'd had that dinner with Chief Robert Joseph, I knew I had to write about it, because I thought about it for such a long time, I thought about it for years, and before I wrote about it, but I knew it was something that I just needed to address in some way, and once I wrote it down, then it became so clear that that's what the book had to be called. And that's, there's, some kind of, something that was really slippery there that felt, really important to address. Yeah.
You mentioned the way that NISHGA is going to be turned, or it has been turned into an audiobook.
Yes, yeah.
And I'd caught wind of this possibility early on, and
right.
It is kind of the brainchild of Stephanie Sinclair,
yeah.
Editor of McClellan Stewart. Really, just a brilliant editor.
Yeah, amazing.
Yeah,
amazing work that she does.
Truly amazing.
Yeah.
And she as well thought, okay, well, how do we turn a book that, of course, has such extraordinary text, but has a lot of visuals
Yes.
that don't translate very well. And even the text, the concreteness of the text on the page, how do we translate that? I wanted to ask if you had any involvement in the audioscape of the audiobook
Yeah.
that is NISHGA, and
Yeah.
if how you helped resolve this problem, turning space into sound, or how you felt about that effort.
Yeah, I did have a lot of I had a lot of conversations with the folks at McClelland and Stewart and the Penguin Random House team that does their audiobooks, and they were exceptional. They're really kind and they're wonderful to work with. And they asked me, how I might, move this work, into an audio space. And it struck me as an incredible challenge. And for those of you who have seen the book and looked at it, there's a lot of there's a lot of stuff on the page that isn't text. It's a lot of stuff on the page that's difficult to move into that space. And in previous moments, I've been really delighted to find a way to move my work that's visual or, that's in the concrete poetry realm, into audio spaces. And in my first couple of books, The Place of Scraps and also Engine, I spent a lot of time, figuring out how to perform them and how to move that, or how to create soundscapes and create sound art that would respond to the text, even if it was ultimately another thing. And with this one, I tried to answer all of their questions, and I tried to point them in the right direction, and tried to give them suggestions that I think made sense for me. But also, I really, because of the difficulty of the text, I really kind of felt like, I had to let them, take the leads, to figure out some of this work, which is truly a gift, I think, to have other people engage with your work in that way, and to, think through it so deeply, and think through every line, and think about how those lines or how those images might exist in a sonic space. So I think they produced a really beautiful audiobook version, which I think you lend your voice to. And I am so deeply grateful for that. So thank you.
It's an honor.
Yeah. And yeah, and also, I've listened to small parts of it, but I've not listened to the whole thing. And for the same reasons that I can't speak some of these things out loud, I also find it difficult to hear some of it. But the actor that they got to play Jordan Abel is this guy named John Walmsley, and he's so wonderful. he reads this work better than I can. So it's an honor to see somebody take up your work that way. And I mean, and maybe this is a question I can ask you too, is like, when your work moves into other kinds of creative mediums, and Brother is turned into a film, what's your role, as a writer, as an artist, in shaping that or not, and how much, how much do you allow your creations to move into these other spaces that have other kinds of with other kinds of creative inputs and energies.
It really is such a great question, and I myself am still figuring it out. But yeah, with the film version of my last novel, I just let them do it because that kind of artistic humility. I think I can write a novel well, I keep trying to write a novel. That's how I
Me
put
too.
it.
Me too.
Yeah. But that's I kind of know the problems that I'll encounter, but I don't have a sense of the grammar of film.
Sure.
And so let someone else do it is what I say.
I think that's such a wonderful gift, to let somebody, take up your art and to bring their own kinds of perspectives to it.
Well, it's an honor, regardless. Yeah, I'm maybe on you're blessing us with an engagement with your own corpus over these 3 lectures. Covering almost all of your books, maybe not so directly Indian, let's say. But I wanted to ask you what it's like to go back to your works. Do you find it inspiring or do you see? Okay, I know when I look at my previous writing. There's always a seed, more than a seed, but there's a problem. There's a problem in something has not been developed, and that becomes the next novel. Yeah. And then something has not been developed, that becomes the next novel. But yeah, what is it like for you to in the way that you are being very generous, touring us through your work right now? What does that do for you in terms of your own creative practice?
Well, I can answer this in a few different ways, and maybe the first way is to say that before I published my first book, which is a book called The Place of Scraps, I was going to so many readings and encountering so many different authors, and I encountered this particular type of fiction writer, novelist, who really hated reading their novels out loud and also hated their own writing, but were really happy to sell books, and those books were great. So. Yeah, those books were great and valuable, and also they had this really tortured relationship with them, and I totally get that. You spend I don't know, 5-10 years writing a thing, it's difficult to look back on it, with much generosity. And in that moment, when I was, really at this very formative stage where I had not yet published my first book, and I wanted to, figure out how I wanted to be an artist or writer in the world, I made this decision, which is that I wanted to write in such a way that I would not only be happy, with the books that I wrote 10 years from now or whatever, but also I wanted to write in such a way that I would surprise myself when I read my work. And so a big part of my writing practice then kind of shifted towards conceptual writing and certain kinds of aleatory methods and procedural methods, because that allowed me, to encounter, some of these works again and again, and also to feel like, I was, surprised by them and interested in them still, and so that was the decision that I made that I tried to follow through on. And going back to those texts, I still talk about The Place of Scraps all the time, because it's a book that people want to talk about, and I want to let them, because I think it's a cool book, and when I go back to it, I see all of these things that I would absolutely do differently, that I would change and shift, and also I feel like it's such a specific record of my particular thinking at that particular time, that I cherish, that I think is really interesting to see the decisions that I made in 2011 or 2012 or whenever it is I was writing the book, and to know that I would make different decisions, but that those that particular output or whatever it is still actually kind of interesting to me.
Yes, I mean, I think that's the most productive thing, to be generous to your earlier artist self, and yet also potentially be have a critical eye on the work.
Totally. And there's definitely some moments where I cringe at my own writing in there, and also I still like it. It feels complicated. And I know other people take it up differently, and that's interesting to me too.
I think that's a great thing. Is there time? How are we doing for time? Is there one or two more questions? Okay. Great. Well, maybe I could go back maybe for my last question to Dad era.
Sure.
That will be the second of the following two questions I'll ask, and then we'll open it up. Given that you'll focus on that book in your next lecture. I guess I want to ask you a question that draws our attention to the occasion of this conversation. As much as I'd love to feel that we have a rapport, just the two of us, in isolation, we are in an academic institution.
Sure.
Feel grateful for the welcome into. At least I feel grateful. You mentioned that at your remarks yesterday. We know that space for the types of conversations we would have, that takes effort, and so I am grateful for that. I also want to say, and I don't know how you feel about this, but I would not have become a writer except for the university. So there were no organic literary communities out there in the world that would welcome me in and say, or just spot me and say, "You are, oh look, a writer. Please come join us." It was in a classroom. In which I was, forced to read what I did not want to read, and then sometimes grew to like it. Exactly. I mean, sometimes did not like it, sometimes grew to like it. That sometimes then grew to use it, use that knowledge in different ways. I became a writer not because I went to school and simply, and I don't know if it's ever this case, but was taught how to represent. I was taught to think critically about the terms of representation.
Sure.
I was taught to understand how representation works within specific contexts. And that I'm grateful for the spaces that allowed me to do that, and for the legacies of scholarship around that. I nevertheless want to say that my creative writing, I've always felt, sits in a type of tension with the academy as is conventionally understood, as it conventionally operates. And your remarks yesterday on red research creation reminded me of comments by Black thinkers on work performed in the academy and the need to press against work that is expected of us, and work that we are oftentimes invited to produce. And I wanted to maybe just read a short quote from someone who is speaking tomorrow, in fact, at the U of T, Christina Sharp, Professor Christina Sharp.
Oh, amazing.
I
love her.
I do too. This is from her book, In the Wake. She says this: the methods most readily available to us sometimes, oftentimes, force us into positions that run counter to what we know. That is, our knowledge is gained from our studies. Yes, I'm skipping a bit, but just
Sure.
it's the context
Yeah.
of Black studies, slavery,
Yeah.
Black being and slavery. But I'm highlighting something that I maybe would. That is, our knowledge is gained from our studies, yes, but also in excess of those studies.
Yeah.
It is gained through the kinds of knowledge from and of the everyday, from what Dion Brand calls sitting in the room with history. We are expected to discard, discount, disregard, jettison, abandon, and measure those ways of knowing, and to enact epistemic violence that we know to be violence against others and ourselves. In other words, for Black academics to produce legible work in the academy often means adhering to research methods that are drafted in the service of a larger destructive force, thereby doing violence to our own capacities to read, think, and imagine otherwise.
Yes.
Despite knowing otherwise, we are often disciplined into thinking through and along lines that reinscribe our own annihilation, reinforcing and reproducing what Sylvia Wynter has called our narratively condemned status. We must become undisciplined. The work we do requires new modes and methods of research and teaching.
Yeah.
When I read this passage, I really can't help but think, and I think there's no accident that I think of Indigenous writers and thinkers. Yeah. And when I think about what you were presenting, when you articulated red research creation, I wonder if I could then ask you, as someone who enacts red research creation yourself, someone who also works within the academy, someone who teaches research creation in the academy, what you think about the present possibilities and limitations for doing research creation at this present moment. Again, I'm thinking of NISHGA as an example, the very example of that research creation also produced in the academy. But NISHGA is a special case. NISHGA is extraordinarily special case. I'm just wondering if you could think about that. Yeah,
absolutely. I think that all of the research that we do is so incredibly important. And also, I think that the ways in which we make that research public is incredibly important. And my thought process, and this comes from Natalie Lovelace's work on research creation in How to Make Art at the End of the World, is that we need to be really careful and thoughtful about the ways in which we make our work public, and that she says that it's important to think about if the best way to make your work, your research public, is actually through dance or through a video installation or through poetry. Like I think all of those academic questions that we wrestle with are valuable, and also if we think about other modes of presentation, that they can it can grow into something, and it can do the work of being undisciplined in the way that Christina Sharp writes about, and I think it can also the work I think I feel like the academy sometimes asks too much of us to fit ourselves into disciplinary kinds of logics, and to be legible in particular kinds of ways in the work that we produce, and that not all of the work that we do needs to fit those categories. Like, some of it can, and that's great, but I think not all of it should. And I think there's a real possibility that opens up when you imagine otherwise, and imagine other modes of making things public, and really deeply consider also who has access to certain kinds of art or academic inquiry. And I do truly believe that I talked a bit about this afternoon with Heather Dory's class, but I truly love Linda Tahiwe's Smith's argument in Decolonizing Methodologies to say that the research that we do here needs to be valuable to the community, and to think radically and inclusively about the kinds of communities that we are are in, or that support us, and to make to make work that can circulate in those communities as well. So I think research creation is a space, I think. It's a space for things that don't fit easily elsewhere. And it's a space where radical kinds of work can happen. And I think that's why I'm interested. And I think it's been taken up by organizational bodies like SSHRC and like other places, and it has specific kinds of definitions or understandings in different parts of the academy. But truly, I think it can be a revolutionary space, in which necessary work happens. And I did ask. So I taught Christina Sharp's book, Ordinary Notes, in my graduate class on research creation this semester. And I told my students, I have no idea if Christina Sharp would agree that this work is a work of research creation. But I had a chance to ask her just last month. And she said, why not? So she was all for it. And I feel like that was the affirmation I needed in my life.
Thank you so much, Jordan. I wonder if maybe, does that make sense to shift to?
We can open it up. Thank you so much for your beautiful questions.
I want to maybe offer, just my gratitude, and but I'm sure others would love to ask you some questions. Yeah. Oh, sure.
If you want to do that, let's do it. If people have questions, wait for the microwave, wave/phone.
But while that is happening,
I'm sorry, Emily.
Just on that last question, David, could I turn it back on you and how you would answer your own question?
I would love to hear that also.
I mean, I think there's potentially a possibility and a limitation. The limitation is how you've already named it so specifically. It becomes bureaucratized. Suddenly, creativity becomes fits into other boxes, and there are new restrictions on what counts and so forth. And the SSHRC's embrace of research creation is it is positive, but it also indicates potential pitfalls, I think, in how we define what that is. But I think the possibility of it, and I would distinguish it from creative writing.
Yes.
Creative writing. I teach creative writing as well as literature, but I like the idea that in the spaces where we are putting our hats on as critics and theorists, but can do our work through innovative methods.
Yes.
Involve all kinds of different work that we have been taught not to do, subtly taught to feel ashamed of. When I started working in the academy as a graduate student, you would never raise the personal.
Yeah.
That would be so shameful.
How shameful to admit that we are human beings. That use the personal pronoun.
Or to attempt.
Yeah.
And of course, there's a way in which we need to think complexly about how we understand ourselves.
Yes.
The circumstances. How can we do that? And they're great questions. That, but to suggest that attempting to position oneself personally in relation to what one is studying, and that's shameful, is more than problematic.
Of course.
And speculation as a mode of, for instance, historical inquiry. That term, critical fabulation, Saidiya Hartman's term.
Yeah.
I think these are profoundly generative, possibilities, I guess. And so I think it feels to me more important in those spaces where creativity is not expected. That may be where research creation could actually have the strongest impact. But of course, I'm speaking as someone in the humanities, so I don't know the broader stakes. But
sure,
that's my limited perspective.
I love that answer, and also I want to say, Shirk's Embrace, sounds like a great title for something.
It's a horrible.
It's not a happy story. Shirk's Embrace is
Again, contradiction. I mean, people try to work to get them to embrace this concept. But, it's true at the same time. It's an unended struggle for hearts and minds, that's,
Okay, we do have a question. We have a microwave over there.
Hello.
Hi. So I'd like to ask you to address, because when you're traversing this emotional geography that encompasses a landscape that's both personal but also private, and then you're also having to navigate, in many ways, I think, secrets that are uncomfortable but also difficult for many people, both familial and historical. Can you sort of take us a little bit through, the discovery aspect of it, but also the impact of trying to do that navigation?
Yeah, I mean, this is a great question, and I think if I can, connect it back to, this discussion or the quote from Christina Sharp, I feel like the personal and the private, inform our theoretical orientations, and I feel like, as you were saying, the disciplinarity, wants to, disavow the importance of things that are personal and private. And, I think this is partly why I think auto theory is so important. And, it's really, and that has a whole long history. And there's, lots of writers, who wrote that way before, that term, was, available to them. And I think that, the way that we the way that we make sense of the world, through our, own positions and subjectivities, I think is deeply meaningful, and that it's through these, sometimes through these small, private, personal moments that we can parse out how to exist. And also, I think, I do think it's a very strange place in the academy to divulge your, secrets, and to do so not through human resources. A lot of secrets there. That's a great question. Hopefully that makes sense and is an answer. Yeah.
I saw some other hands up earlier. Is there another question?
Yes, there's.
Thank you. Once again, I think I'm thoroughly, enjoying the second day of the series, because yesterday it was, about empty spaces.
Yeah.
So, Jordan, I'm yet to read NISHGA, but what I gather, basis understanding you as a writer and the context, the concept that you, take into your writing, there is a lot that is there from the point of view of subjectivity, of a writer's mind, articulations, hence the idea of the personal and the private. But is it also not, a kind of a perspective that the personal and the private, they are also somewhere related, interfacing to the larger collective? So my question is that specifically, while you were writing NISHGA, did you ever feel, a sense of overwhelming, which came from the context of also somewhere touching upon the collective, or carrying on your shoulders the very idea of representations that are, of course, steering through the private and the personal, but they might also, in that course of meandering, touch upon the collective, the larger.
I have an answer for this. And I think that and this comes up in the book a little bit, but my experience of indigeneity as I was growing up, felt very personal and siloed. Like growing up outside of my community, it really kind of felt like I was the only one going through this, and so it was this like really kind of private like pain that I felt like I was experiencing, and that I had no one to talk to, and I had no one to connect to, like especially in my early life, that was mostly pre-internet, and so. I think one of the things that really kind of kept me going, like when I initially started doing these talks, and the first one, like one of the first talk that I did that was about this material happens here at the University of Toronto at Smarrow's Trans-Canada's conference, and that was a really formative moment where I was able to share some of this work. And one of the things that happened almost immediately was that I started encountering other people who had very similar experiences that were, maybe a little bit different in one way or another, but that, that they felt very, they felt very seen by the work that I was doing. And I really valued that feedback, and it made me feel like, this was even though, I can only speak from my experience, I can only, speak about how I exist in the world, that, maybe that would translate to others, and that maybe, there were other kinds of experiences that other people were having that, may benefit from, seeing the story in the world. I think that's really what got me through it, and allowed me to make that sprint, in finishing this book and putting it out in the world.
On that note, I would observe that NISHGA is dedicated to the Indigenous peoples of the Americas.
Yes.
It is an address to
That's right.
a scale that is global. But it's, I think, yeah.
Thanks for your question. I think we have time for one more, if there is one more question from the room. Here at this
one. There's one right here. Yeah.
Thank you both very much for such a great talk. My question's about research creation. Jordan, you talked about this a little bit, but you didn't delve too deeply into your role as an instructor. You're both teachers at post-secondary institutions, and so I was wondering what you both think the role of professors and how pedagogies must change in order to cultivate and encourage what Christina Sharp calls being undisciplined and new modes of critical engagement. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I truly, as an instructor, like I really, do feel obligation, I think, to open up as much space as I can for students to do the work that they feel is meaningful in the ways that they, feel are meaningful, and that, I don't know what your experience has been like, David, but often, for me, it involves, disagreeing with colleagues about, what counts as scholarship, and, what counts as research. And those are really boring, frustrating conversations to have. And so, I just don't have them anymore. My strategy, is one of, my strategy, for students, and this happened in my own, in my own like PhD committee and everything, is just to, try to surround those students, with people who are open-minded and are interested in creating these spaces, and, to tell, the other instructors who are not interested in doing those spaces to fuck off. And I'm happy with that. That's a good way to be.
Agreed. I mean, when Christina Sharp says, we must become undisciplined, it is not a call for sloppiness or half-assed work. It is a call for a new notion of what it means to be, if not disciplined, for a new rigor. Mm-hmm. And I guess I agree with you. It's there are unfortunately there are different fronts for this struggle, let's call it, and there is the institution, there are colleagues. I actually think I'm not even going to go there, but with respect to students, I think it sounds cliche, but I really do mean this. It means listening more to how students want to take their research and interests, where they want to take them, and being willing to adjust requirements. Again, that does not have to be at a cost of what is being taught, the potential for learning in the classroom, what students get exposed to, being exposed to text and learning to think critically. These were crucially important for me. And I want to pass on that. It's not the answer to everything, but at least I want to share that. but also being open to that which I can only glimpse, the new ways of doing the work that we've been doing.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I agree with that. Good question.
Very good question, yeah.
Yeah.
And a great place to end this beautiful, intimate conversation. I'd like to thank you both so much. That was really, really wonderful. And we are especially delighted to have been able to host this conversation here in this moment when we are celebrating 50 years of Canadian Studies at University College. So it's such a delight to have two wonderful thinkers and writers who've contributed so much to rethinking our stories about this place that we call Canada, but also opening the possibility for new kinds of story making and storytelling for moving towards the future. So really deeply appreciate that. I'd also like to thank the audience for the questions and for the UC events team for all the support. A reminder that we do have one more lecture that will take place tomorrow, also starting at 4:30, but back downstairs in the Paul Cadario Conference Center. Please join us. We'll hear more about Jordan's forthcoming book, Dad Era, which is coming out with Coach House Press. So that's tomorrow again at 4:30. And now I'd like you to join me in a round of applause before we proceed to the reception at the back of the room.